You've been studying this situation with mansion tax in LA. Can you tell us what's happening with it?
Absolutely. It was popularly known as the mansion tax, and this was very effective branding. It created a real estate transfer tax on properties above $5 million, which to the average person might sound like a mansion, something more than $5 million. What was not discussed publicly is that most of the properties in Los Angeles that are over $5 million are not houses. They're apartment buildings. They're retail centers, they're industrial centers, manufacturing centers, sound stages, things like this. And so really what Measure ULA did was put a very high tax, one of the highest in the nation, on the sale or transfer of high value properties. If you sold a $5 million house or a $5 million apartment building, let's say, on April 1st, 2023, you would actually have a very small transfer tax just to cover the recording in the county. But if you sold it for $5,001,000, you'd now be looking at a $200,000 additional tax on that sale. And if you sold it for $10,001,000, you'd be looking at $550,000 tax. And it doesn't matter if you make money or lose money on the sale, you're paying that tax. So Measure ULA has made it even less attractive to sell. So it means that more people will decide just to keep holding their properties longer and fewer properties will be open for development.
This is Peak Plaza. It is going to be a 104-unit affordable housing complex, and money is currently being spent on this one. Now, this is currently one of 9 developments currently using funds from LA's new real estate transfer tax, called the mansion tax by some. Measure ULA was passed by Los Angeles voters back in 2022 and slaps high-value real estate transactions with a hefty tax. Transactions more than $5.3 million get hit with a 4% tax, and transactions above $10.6 million are stuck with a 5.5% tax. The funds were intended to go toward rental assistance, homeless services, and to help with the city's affordable housing crisis, but there's been criticism that not enough of the more than $1 billion raised by this tax has been spent to build new affordable housing. So far, only around 1% of the funds have been spent on affordable housing construction, acquisition, or rehabilitation. According to the United to House LA coalition, what's been spent doesn't tell the whole story. The small amount of money so far spent has gone to developments that were already in progress, and many of the affordable housing developments that will be funded by the tax are still in their early stages, with hundreds of millions allocated for new housing. But critics of the new tax question if those funds will actually be spent. They say that the way the law is currently written, the money raised by Measure ULA is difficult to blend with other funding sources. Additionally, they say that Measure ULA has already stifled high-dollar real estate transactions in LA's city limits. This chart, using county assessor data, shows how real estate transaction rates for properties above the tax threshold plunged in the city of LA, shown by the red line, opposed to similar transactions in LA County, shown by the blue line, where the tax isn't in effect.
If you're going to raise $1 billion and if you're going to have the kind of really horrendous negative impacts on the real estate and multifamily housing markets that Measure ULA has had, there should be something to show for that. And as of the end of the year, Measure ULA had only spent less than 1%, less than $10 million of that money on actual housing.
California touts $1 billion mansion tax haul as critics ask where 90% went. I don't know about you, but anytime I hear about money, spending, and homelessness in California or Washington or any big Democrat-led state, you immediately go to fraud. Fraud. I'm not saying this is fraud, but then we don't really know where all the money went either. So, about 90% of it. Let's get into it. California officials are celebrating a milestone that would have sounded fanciful a few years ago. More than $1 billion raised from a so-called mansion tax on high-end property sales. Yet, as the totals climb, housing advocates and taxpayers are asking a blunt question that cuts through the victory laps. If the money was supposed to transform homelessness and rental aid, why is only a sliver of the spending easy to trace? You know what? I mean, there are so many instances of this. You've got welfare fraud. You've got Medicaid fraud, Medicare fraud. You've got, all the money to the criminal illegals. Where'd all that go? Well, we're not really sure, but they used it up. And then you've got all of the $24 billion California spent on the homeless industrial complex, and we don't really know where vast majority of that is either. It's just kind of out there, but spent, but gone, and not really traceable because you just don't have programs that trace it. And you're left with, where is the money going? So any single time I see one of these stories, I'm going to jump on it. And after a while, there's a pattern, right? There is a pattern. Okay, the money is all there. It's accounted for. It just hasn't been spent. All right, okay. And you're thinking the same thing that I am. Really? Where did the money go? Yeah, right? How California's mansion tax became $1 billion promise. California's mansion tax is rooted in a simple political pitch: tap the state's most expensive real estate deals to pay for those locked out of the housing market. You know, what you've got is you've got a tax. You've got basically a progressive tax. Socialists love the whole progressive tax ideology, which is, well, we're just going to tax the rich more and more and should work out great. But how many deals are not happening? And you have to have turnover of properties. Just any market, that is pretty normal. Now you don't in LA. Now you've got businesses not either selling or buying because nobody wants to pay a massive, massive excise tax on a real estate transfer. And that's what this comes down to. So, you know, the impacts that you've had over an excise tax like this, sales tax on real estate, however you want to call it, are substantial. And is $1 billion worth of tax revenue that you can only pinpoint to having maybe 1% actually spent so far with 10% accounted for? Does that make sense? I mean, California's politicians, it does. LA's politicians, it does. Because that's what they do all day long. Just come up with these programs, tax the absolute F out of things, and can't really work out where it went. Or, hey, that's not fair. We know where it's going. We just haven't spent it yet. Okay. All right. The levy known as Measure ULA hits property taxes between $5 million and $10 million at 4%, $10 million and above with the 5.5% rate. That is a massive tax. That is a big, big tax. I mean, no wonder the market's just locked up. For all the fanfare around the $1 billion haul, the public paper trail tells a more modest story. Housing advocates and local watchdogs say they clearly identify only about 10% of the mansion tax revenue. And the rest is stalled in bureaucracy or diverted to less visible uses. When the author talks to tenants facing eviction or people living in encampments, that disconnect between the promised scale of the tax and the visible impact on the street is the first thing they bring up. Well, if you ask them, hey, what'd you think about that $1 billion, raised revenue with the excise tax? They're not going to have a clue. Hey, have you heard about all the money coming your way to get you off the streets? Oh, yeah. Yep, I have. Reporting on the state's celebration of its $1 billion in mansion revenue, critics can only roughly track about 1/10 of that into specific rental aid, shelter beds, or construction commitments. And this is the way the whole homeless industrial complex goes. Oh yeah, let's raise money for it. Let's give affordable housing. We'll do this. We'll do that. I think we're pretty well justified in being concerned where the money is being spent. It's one of my more recent podcasts. Los Angeles charity CEO charged with fraud, allegedly funding a lavish lifestyle with $23 million. The guy took in this whole story. CEO of a LA homeless service charity faces federal and state fraud charges. He had lavish vacations. He went to 4 seasons in Maui. He did it right. Designer clothes, got a Range Rover. They've got video footage of his Range Rover being driven up on the trailer. Repo time. And a whole bunch of clothes. And in a house in Greece. And a $7 million home in LA. $23 million in public money meant to keep people off the streets. So when we hear of billions of dollars of tax revenue, and then this whole notion that we're not really sure where it went, I think it's justified to really question what's going on. Alexander Sufer, 42, was arrested Friday at his $7 million home that investigators believe he afforded using funds that were supposed to support his nonprofit, get this, called Abundant Blessings. Abundant Blessings. I am in no way, shape, or form saying that these two stories are related. I'm also not saying they aren't related, but there is nothing to link one with the other than in the back of our heads, we're like, yeah, but what about that other story? What about that one super dude who had the $125,000 Range Rover and he was living large. He was buying himself stuff. And he was supposed to be finding shelter and providing 3 meals a day for more than 600 homeless residents. He owned this big building, and he said that he was renting it, and he was getting reimbursed. And he had the scam going. He had this bad boy down. He bought a $125,000 Range Rover, $2,450 from his jacket, vacation in home in Greece, Hawaii trip. And he stayed at the Four Seasons where the White Lotus in Maui. Epic location. I mean, if you're going to steal taxpayers' money, you might as well go large, right? And that's what this guy did. He was living the high life while the people suffering the homeless lived on the streets with no shelter, no food. That seems problematic, doesn't it? You know what? It is. 2 years in, and the Los Angeles mansion tax is more controversial than ever. Initially, what happened is that we thought, well, this is just going to absolutely seize up revolution of the sales process of, luxury new homes, not necessarily new, but luxury single family homes, but then other buildings as well. And that's what it's essentially done. Lackluster revenue performance further emboldens critics, with sales of non-single family properties down by half since the tax was enacted. Half. Your sales volume is down by half. I mean, who wants to pay that tax? Hey, maybe we'll wait for this to blow over. Maybe we'll wait for some more homelessness fraud to come out. Maybe there will be fraud involved with this and they'll repeal this tax. When have you ever known a really strong revenue-producing tax to be repealed in one of these states, counties, cities where, this is the drill? Hey, we got, you got about a third of the homelessness in California, with 70,000 homeless people, I think, in LA. So you're going to tag some of the mansions. Between the mansion tax, the billionaire tax, the whatever tax, state income tax, I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on. And, we're not even talking about just basic cost of living in California. How about the wildfire rebuild in LA that's just taking forever, really isn't going anywhere because of bureaucratic, nonsense. Just can't seem to get on that. Hey, issue out that permit and let's build these bad boys. Now, you've got so many things that are kind of working against each other, but a lot of it is based on governmental inefficiency. It's just bogged down in all this red tape, all of this bureaucracy, all of this just stuff. And then as a consumer, as you and I, the consumer, look at these stories, we immediately, when we see a headline like this, 2 years in, LA mansion tax more controversial than ever. And all you can think of is, well, that's because they're screwing us. They're screwing us and they're spending it on a bunch of nonsense. Or they're like that one super dude and he's hanging out on Maui. He's living large in his fancy suit, driving his fancy Range Rover. He got a house in Greece, got a $7 million mansion somewhere in LA. I mean, you're left with thoughts like that, right? And I don't think that's necessarily unwarranted. Let's put it that way. I think it's completely warranted because we have story after story after story. I mean, when the audit department from California comes in and basically says, yep, the Newsom administration is got a high likelihood of having some fraud in there because there's just so many things that aren't accounted for. Entire homeless industrial complex, 24 billion, 30 billion, whatever is spent. And they can't really work out where the money is going. And then we get these stories and you're left with, well, odds are there's some hanky-panky in there. And maybe this is just a slow rolling story. Oh, we got to get all the projects lined up, and then we got to, frame each one up, 1 2x4, after another. We can't do any of this mass construction. But then you're left there thinking, okay, but when are they really going to start cranking up the money and building some projects? And we just never really get to that point, do we? And meanwhile, you ask folks on the street, how's the homeless deal? Is it decreasing like we're being told? Numbers are coming down? Or is that just accounting error or an accounting fudge factor for California in general, for Los Angeles in general? Because you ask folks on the street, hey, what's the homelessness situation looking like? Does it seem like it's 9% reduced? And most folks are like, what? What are you talking? Oh, yeah, 9% reduction in homelessness. You're still up over 2019. Those numbers are still up. But there's all of this back and forth nonsense, right? And you're just left with, I don't really know what to believe. So, like I do in appraising, if you don't really know what the deal is, if you can't really make out what it is, you put the facts out there, you let everybody decide on their own. The $1 billion mansion tax, where did the 90% go? Is it being spent? Probably. Do we know for sure? No. Will it be spent in the future? Maybe. Solid maybe. And if it does, I'll let you know. Make sure you're subscribed, hit that notification bell. I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks again for being here. Bye for now.